today I have a review, and it is for a series of books, actually. It is the Riyria Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan. The first book is Theft of Swords, I believe, but I'm going to be focusing on the entire series and kind of just giving a general overview of that. So, Riyria Revelations is about basically these two friends that take on jobs to steal things for nobles. It is in a fantasy world. It's a fantasy series, and yeah, basically they're just best friends, and they steal things to kind of like help people blackmail, or to help people who are going to be blackmailed, to help people in certain situations, things like that. And so nobles pay them money to steal, letters, swords, since the first book is Theft of Swords, things like that. And they are very renowned for this, for being able to steal pretty much anything. The two main characters are Royce and Hadrian. Royce is kind of like the sneaky, like the type of person that you think of whenever you think of your rogue in your D&D campaign. He is great at lockpicking. He's very nimble and athletic, agile, I guess is a better way to say that. And he's the sneaky one. And then Hadrian is more of the brute force. He is very skilled at combat, and for a long time before being part of Riyria, it's spelled like it's supposed to be said, Riyria, so sometimes I have a hard time saying it. But he's the fighter of the two. And basically the personalities are very similar to me. If you have seen The Road to El Dorado, the cartoon that came out in, I think, the early 2000s, they're very similar to Miguel and Tulio in that movie. And it's basically like if you took those characters and made them a lot more competent and put them in a fantasy world, then you would basically get these two characters. So yes, in this series, you kind of follow these two characters as they go through different missions of basically sort of being, I don't know what really to call it. It's not mercenaries because they're not fighting, but they're just being paid for things and by nobles, sometimes of questionable morality, I guess. And so there are 6 books total, but they're often bound up in a way that they present as 3 books. And so like the Theft of Swords, the first book, is technically the first 2 books. It's very confusing to me, but I don't know. I have no room to talk. I read Terry Pratchett. And but yes, so throughout the series, we follow these two as different things happen. They kind of become more and more involved in politics. There is basically an empire that's kind of trying to take over the world. And they are, at first they have nothing to do with that, but slowly through doing these jobs with nobles, they kind of get sucked into it more and more. And we get to see multiple perspectives as the stories move on. So yeah, I'll get into that more later in this review. So first things first, the plot. The plot of these is very action based. It is very, I'm trying not to say fun, because I feel like whenever you say that a plot is fun, it's almost like saying that it shouldn't be taken seriously, like almost like a little flippant thing. But in all honesty, I had a lot of fun reading these books, and I think it was largely because of the plots. They go in sometimes unexpected places, sometimes expected places, but in a good way. Like, ways that were foreshadowed. And at the end of the day, it's kind of just like this adventure romp where you're with these two thieves and you're just along for the ride. And I don't know, I had a really good time with the plot. I thought that these books were all a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed how Sullivan sort of tied a lot of the little plot points that maybe you thought weren't going to matter back into the main plot later on. It wasn't something where it was complex enough that you like had to keep a notebook and like write down everything, but it was done in a way that a lot of times it was unexpected, and so like, but it was set up well. I don't know how to express without giving spoilers, but yeah, there were just certain things that happened, and it would almost be like, hey, remember this guy? And it'd be like, I do remember that guy. Oh my goodness, that's right. And so that was really enjoyable, a lot of fun. So yes, the plot was yeah, just really fun. Like, but don't let that make you think that it's not going to still like make you cry sometimes. All right. So next up is the world building. The world building is really interesting, and it's actually what makes me want to read more from this author, because I understand that there are other books that are not in this series but are still in this world where they kind of expand on the world building, and that's a lot of fun. So the world is a fantasy world, but most of the plots take place in kind of like more urban settings, so you don't necessarily get to see a lot of the extremely fantastical elements, especially early on. But there is magic. One character that comes in later is semi-skilled in magic, and so there is magic. It's kind of a no-no though. It's against the religion that is dominant in this world at this time, and so it's forbidden. And there are magical creatures that come in. There are also elves and dwarves. The dwarves are, I mean, I wouldn't say that they're very typical Tolkien-esque, but at the same time, they're like very craft oriented. I guess they're just, if you go very like back to the roots of mythological dwarves into like Norse mythology, how they were craftsmen, then that's pretty much what they are here. They're very craft oriented, and they're good at complex mechanisms as well as building. But so that's dwarves. Elves are a little bit more complicated because they're kind of just like this mysterious like shadow race. Like, there are half elves that exist in human society, and they're very much looked down upon. It reminded me of Dragon Age, if you've ever read Dragon Age. This may have come before Dragon Age. It probably came before Dragon Age, but it reminded me of Dragon Age, where the elves are kind of second-class citizens, very disrespected, and that sort of thing in human society. But they aren't full elves. They're like usually like half or just part elf. And so that full-blooded elves are kind of on the fringe. They're very little is known about them, and you get to learn more and more about them as the story goes on. There is a very interesting and rich mythology that is integrated into the story as well, where it talks about the different gods and different things that happened in their past, and it's the way he ties it in. It's really, accurate to how humans react, I feel like, because there's sort of the story that there's a god for humans, a god for dwarves, a god for elves. And since most of the story is very human focused, the humans are like, well, obviously ours is the best. And it's, and they kind of, yeah, it's, I just like reading stories where things like that are explored. And I enjoyed the way that Sullivan tied it into his story without getting too heavy into it, but also didn't ignore that it was going to influence the lives of his characters. Because I feel like it kind of either goes one way or the other very often in character or in fantasy stories. So yes, I really enjoyed the world building. I really look forward to reading more from this author to find out more about this world. All right, so next up is characters. This was possibly my favorite part of this story. I hesitate to say that because I liked everything else so much, but they were just very well defined. The character arcs were so enjoyable. So we had Royce and Hadrian, the two sort of main characters, and they are definitely the predominant protagonists throughout the entire series. But we do meet several others, and there are points of view. They are point of view characters later on in the series. So there's Arista, who is a princess that hires them for a job basically at one point. And she definitely starts out as like a little bit spoiled, a little bit naive about a lot of things. But she just has an amazing arc as she goes on. She learns and she kind of works to earn her own value in her own eyes, if that makes sense. Because at no point is anyone like looking down on her or thinking, well, I mean, obviously characters think bad thoughts about her because they're people. But she kind of gains her own self-confidence and learns her own abilities and what she can do and who she can be throughout the series. And she is definitely the one that I identified with the most. Partially because her personality is a little bit of locking herself in her room and reading books instead of dealing with people, and I can identify with that. She also happens to have, I believe it's long auburn hair, and I really related to her on other levels as well, though. She's kind of awkward when it's dealing with people, especially in situations where she's trying to get people to, I guess, see her side of things. She gets very frustrated at times, and I can definitely understand that because I've been there. And so yeah, that's Arista. Her brother is Ulrich, and he is a prince. He is even more spoiled. Oh my gosh. When he first appears, he was very spoiled rotten, and he kind of reminded me of Kuzco at the beginning of The Emperor's New Groove. I feel like I'm making a lot of random cartoon references this time. I'm sorry if that bothers you, but it's not gonna stop. So I feel like he was like Kuzco at the beginning of Emperor's New Groove. He's very spoiled. He's used to getting his way. He was just such a brat. Oh my gosh, he was such a brat. I remember, like, as I was reading it, I was like, I hate this guy, but I kind of hope that he grows into someone I like eventually. And he definitely does grow and develop. And he has a very good arc and it's a very satisfying conclusion to his arc. I enjoyed his and Arista's relationship, and it very much intertwined throughout the books because they're brother and sister. And you got to see sort of sibling conflict with them, but then sibling bonding and conflict and bonding, and how it goes back and forth, and how their relationship grew throughout the series. And I really appreciated that. Let's see. The last character that I am going to talk about is Thrace, because I don't want to go on forever naming every single character. But I feel like she was kind of the last really major character. She is a peasant girl who hires Riyria to kind of help her with a mythical monster. I really liked her character as well. Arista is the one I identified with most, but I think that Thrace might have my favorite character arc in the entire series. She starts out as a peasant girl who like needs help with her situation. She is a very strong character from the get-go. She's kind of scrappy. There are just situations where she's like willing to like stand up and fight back when other people aren't, and I appreciate that about her. And then she just goes through stuff, and you get to see her fall down and rise up, and fall down and rise up, and you get to see these situations and how she overcomes it. And I think that Sullivan does a really good job of going through that downfall with her and helping the reader to empathize with her struggles, and not being like, oh, this bad thing happened to this character, but you know what? It's all okay. You know, a couple weeks later and she's just going to be right as rain, back to normal and everything. No, you go through the process of the healing from her downfalls. And I think that that is probably one of the things that Sullivan was strongest with. Whenever a character had a failure or had some sort of damage happening to them emotionally, Sullivan helped you to sit with them and see how it was. Sometimes it wasn't even from their point of view, it was from somebody else's that was just nearby, but you could still sort of tell what was happening just through their reactions to things. And that was very much the case with Thrace. I really, really loved her entire arc. It was wonderful. All right, so yes, I think that is everything that I wanted to talk about with Riyria Revelations. I hope that this video was helpful to you. Needless to say, I loved this series and I am so excited to read more from Michael J. Sullivan. If you have a recommendation on what I should read next from him, or any series that are similar to this, then please comment down below. Yes, like I said, I hope that this was a helpful video, and I hope that you're having an amazing day or night or whatever. I will see you around.